Hello, so today I will talk about how continuous manufacturing can help in accelerating drug product development. So when you talk about accelerated development, you think about reduced time, reduced material for development, and also you think about the problematic of process scale. At which scale shall I validate my process? Will it be representative enough? What is the level of process understanding I should have and I can afford with the time I have? And also, when you develop the process in an accelerated way, you also have to take into account that the analytical development should be accelerated as well, and that your manufacturing site should be ready to receive the product. And when you think about all of this, you realize that it is one of the advantage of continuous manufacturing, that you need less time, you need less API to develop. And also, as you will have little to no scale up, then this problematic about scale and its impact, its representativity, it completely disappears so that you are sure that you build the process understanding straight from the beginning. And even though it doesn't help directly on the analytical development or on the site readiness, for the analytical development, you have the opportunity to use inline PAT tools, for instance, and for the site readiness, if you develop your process at the same time that you are commercializing or that you intend to commercialize, then it allows you to have all in one package. At UCB, we actually haven't started to go to continuous manufacturing because of this accelerated development. However, we observe that when we want to accelerate a process, we go to continuous manufacturing. So the whole journey started for us in 2014, where the continuous manufacturing project started in development. As we knew nothing about continuous manufacturing at that time, we decided to join an external network and especially to collaborate with RCP in Austria to get the knowledge of people already involved in continuous manufacturing. In 2015, we had our development equipment qualified, and also we wanted to have more scientific knowledge and scientific support. So we started a collaboration with Ghent University, which allowed us to have access to cutting-edge science in the field of twin screw granulation in particular. In 2016, the program moved slowly from development to manufacturing, and so the development of the manufacturing area for continuous manufacturing started. And 2 years later, in 2018, we had the CM area qualified, the manufacturing equipment qualified. We extended it in 2019, and as we grew in the field of twin screw granulation, we decided last year to start developing in other continuous technology, and especially in continuous direct compression. And this year we are designing our CM area for dry processing. So when you talk about process development, and especially in the context acceleration, you can look at where you can accelerate. And you have 5 basic steps: process selection, formulation, development at small scale, scale up, and design phase. When we were talking about typical batch development time, we were around 4 to 5 years. When we developed our first continuous manufacturing process, well, we didn't save anything in terms of process selection and formulation, and we benefited from continuous manufacturing to reduce the design space definition because you can run your experiments faster with less material. But we spent quite a lot of time in the development at one single scale because it was the first time, so trials and error, and we spent a lot of energy in figuring out all the things that we thought would be easy, or spending too much time on things that we shouldn't have. Then we gain into knowledge. So for routine development, we managed to reduce the scale, the small scale, and we reintroduced a bit of scale up to have a more efficient development routine. We reintroduced scale up because we observed that it was more beneficial actually to have this development and commercial scale in terms of material consumption. And what I will talk about today is about the optimized procedure that we have for CM development, where we have really developed a faster decision for process selection and formulation decision. We haven't touched about the design space. However, we have expanded a bit the knowledge we gather at small scale, but we have reduced the scale up to a pseudo scale up that I will talk about later, which allows us to shorten the timelines again. And so after 6 years of development in continuous manufacturing, we managed to reduce our development time of about half of its length compared to the typical batch development. So when we talk about the formulation and process selection, we have three tools mainly. The first one is in silico tools, using material databases or external databases that allows us to have a high level understanding of the processability and to pinpoint what are the API challenges. Then we have internal databases that allows us to check, is this new API similar to something I have already tested and so that I can capitalize? Or do I manage to fit it into a statistical model per unit operation to tell me this will be efficient, this will not be, or it is completely different to anything I've tested before? And the last part is the downscaling, because it's okay to say with in silico tools, this technology is suitable or this should work. At some point we need to really assess that. So we have procedures that are using 10 to 300 grams per experiment to check final feasibility and really design the final formulation. So if we're talking about dry processing in particular, first thing first, and I'm sure that everybody heard about it already, so it's about interrogating databases such as the manufacturing classification system, which gives you rule of thumbs to say, okay, let's go to dry processing, or this will never work, go to wet processing. For dry processing, we especially like to use ZoomLab, which is going a bit further, as it allows you to really identify what will be the challenge of your API if you go to dry processing, and eventually to guide you into the formulation. The second step is that here we are talking about continuous manufacturing. So to know if you can go to continuous manufacturing, you need to know if your API can be fed continuously. So for that, we have created an internal feeding database. So we didn't want to reinvent the wheel and redo everything that others have done, like Ghent University or Rutgers. We instead focused really on the API database because we wanted to explore this small area to have a better detail of understanding. And so when we have a new API, we check quickly, will it feed, will not feed, and what is the quality I can expect. And finally, for the dry processing, we have efficient downscaling, which allows us to screen formulation and to have a first idea about punch adhesion, compactability, compressibility, which is based on compaction simulator. With about 10 grams of material, we can already select the formulation completely and check if we will have some major issues like punch adhesions or not compactable at all. If we are talking about wet processing, so again, we check that it is appropriate for wet granulation. And in wet granulation, actually, we don't focus so much on the feeding. Feeding is important for continuous always, but it's okay for us to go with a pre-blend. So we look at it, but we don't focus too much. However, we want to know if the API is compatible for twin screw granulation technology in particular. And for this, we are working especially in close collaboration with Ghent University that has developed a database where you can interrogate for a new API what is, based on the properties that you have, the likelihood that it will succeed in twin screw granulation. So for a new API, we ask, okay, is it a good candidate? Is it within the tested range, but not that great? And also we can have first guidance around the formulation and what the granules will look like according to the process parameters you apply. So it gives you a rough estimation, but at least you know it is worth engaging into this technology. So when we have selected the formulation and we know that this is a process to go, we need to develop the process. And again, free tools. So we have in silico prediction, where we use mechanistic modeling to take low-risk decisions and to reduce our number of experiments. We also have advanced characterization, and there I'm talking about equipment and process characterization. The idea is to build the process understanding and to give an orientation to the different tests to be performed. And finally, we have the pseudo-scale-up I was talking at the beginning, which allows us to reduce further the amount of material we use. For the twin screw granulation development, so again, our preferred partner is Ghent University for this. They have especially developed a population balance model that allows you to predict the evolution of your granules along the length of the granulator screw based on the API properties. And so often when we talk about population balance model for granulation, we think, okay, I will quantify my nucleation or my breakage. But it's a scientific thing. It doesn't give me the final process. So how can I benefit from it? What we do is that we take measurements at one of the location and then we interrogate the model. What will happen if I change the screw configuration and instead of producing at location L5, I'll produce at location L6. And so I can have quick decision without any further testing on what is the best screw configuration. It doesn't matter that the model is right on spot or that you might not take the best decision, because at the end of the day, your screw configuration is not something that critical. You just need to have something that is good enough. So we stop losing material in testing it formally. We interrogate the model, and that's good enough for us. When we have selected our screw, then we want to develop the process. So we have still the typical DOE, no problem about that. But instead of running pre-tests where you will vary all your process parameters to check what is the range that you will explore in your design of experiment, we use nucleation experiments. So in nucleation experiments, you assemble your screws in a way that you only have the nucleation that happens, so no granule growth, no breakage. And we put a thermal camera that will measure the outlet nuclei temperature. And it happens that in nucleation, the temperature of your nuclei will depend only on the enthalpy of wetting. So the wetting efficiency, so your nucleation efficiency. And in 1 minute test about, we will screen our range of liquid to solid ratio, so the amount of liquid we put inside the granulation, and we check our temperature profile. And when we reach the top, it means that we have achieved complete or at least the maximum wetting, and then it will go down. But then it tells you this point, this maximum, is where you should start exploring your granulation. Don't go before. Before, you will not have even achieved the maximum nucleation. So just you forget about that and you start developing there. So the idea is not to suppress completely design of experiments, but it is to perform the correct design of experiment and not to engage material into things that at the end of the day you already know that will not work. And with this procedure, it's just 1 minute instead of full pretest. You have granulated, so it is wet, so you need to dry. And so the next unit operation is the drying. We are working in strong collaboration with RCP on the dryer. And what we have developed so is that in this line configuration, we have a segmented dryer with 6 drying chambers or 6 cells. At steady state, only, well, 4 to 5 cells will be filled at the same time. However, when you develop, you don't want to engage the material to fill 4, 5, 6 cells just to get information about one, because it's just crazy amount of material for no good result. So what we have is that we have defined pseudo scale-up rules. So we have performed experiments and we bridge with CFD model to know how the hair is spreading when you have one cell filled compared to when you have your dryer operating at steady state. And so with that, we can design our experiments on one single cell. And when we have the response on one single cell, we perform the pseudo scale-up to calculate what will be the process parameters to apply so that I get the same results when I run with the full dryer operating or when I just run with one cell filled. And this way, we can accelerate the development and we especially do not lose all the materials from the other cells because we don't use them. The final one is about the design space. So when we run with this dryer, you have the 6 cells. And from the past experience, we know that the cells are not all effective at the same level. So we have some variability between the cells, and we observe that in all our projects. So our question is, what is the cause of the variability and how can I manage it? So for that, we've performed a full equipment characterization. So basically, in each of the 6 cells, we put a probe to measure the temperature and the velocity of the air at 6 locations in the 6 cells. And we checked what was the process conditions that were leading to a variability. So we did a few actual tests and we bridged with CFD to get the areas that we could not explore. And at the end of the day, what we observe is that yes, there is a variability, but there is a way to minimize this variability. So not to be too much of a Captain Obvious, if you use a crazy airflow, yes, you will have more turbulence and so more variability. But the idea is that for the next process you develop, you can say, this is my safe space. This is the range where the variability will be minimum. So you should better have a process that works in this area, because if not, you will have variability and then learn to cope with it. So to summarize, we have worked in the different areas to really have an optimized procedure for continuous manufacturing development. We've worked on the formulation, we've worked on the process screening, on the optimization, and on the batch size increase. So to really get a procedure that allows us to run commercial batches from 15 to 250 kilo. And the whole development package is done in about 1.5 to 2 years. Also, with this procedure, we managed to reduce our API consumption down to 150 kilo when we are talking about formulation, about 50% drug load. So which means that this is about the same amount of material that you would need for one single scale-up batch if you would operate batch-wise. And with that, I would like to thank all the colleagues that are working with me on the continuous manufacturing at UCB. And I hope that you will have some questions in the Q&A session. Thank you very much.